Well, Matthew Bryza is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. He's joining us right now from Istanbul. This is some breakthrough, isn't it?
It sure does seem to be like it. I mean, earlier today, just a few hours ago, it seemed like everything was off the rails. It seemed like President Erdoğan had decided to link Turkey's EU membership with Sweden's accession to NATO, which was a dead end. So I think there's a lot of credit that should go to Secretary General Stoltenberg for finding a formula that can work for Turkey. But I think we should also keep in mind that the negotiations are not finished. As we know, as you've reported, now President Erdoğan has pledged to move the agreement for Sweden to accede to NATO to the Turkish Grand National Assembly. But there could still be negotiations going on there. Please think back to 2009 when there were the Turkey-Armenia protocols that the Turkish government signed on to, but then sent to the parliament for ratification. And because Armenia didn't move forward on leading to an agreement with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh, the Grand National Assembly never ratified the protocol. So the negotiations will continue, but nonetheless, yes, I totally agree. This is a huge potential breakthrough.
Yeah, we mustn't get ahead of ourselves. I appreciate that. But let me throw in Hungary to the mix here. As you may have heard in the news conference that we were broadcasting on our channel here, the question of Hungary's dissent as well was mentioned. But Jens Stoltenberg thinks they're going to fall into line. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I think that Orban and Hungary have been hiding behind Turkey all along, not wanting to just say yes, because as always, Orban wants to negotiate whatever he can in terms of concessions from his transatlantic allies. Maybe, like it or not, that's just the way he is. But I think that in the end, yes, he's going to fall in behind Turkey. And I would anticipate, because Turkey has been such a staunch proponent of NATO enlargement, that the Grand National Assembly sometime soon is going to ratify the accession of Sweden to NATO, and therefore Hungary will follow.
Can I get your take on Ukraine membership? That's a whole different ballgame. We're in the middle of a war. NATO doesn't want to join a war, does it? So President Zelensky is going to have to be patient.
Yeah, he is, but he's also indicated he knows that. So he has himself recognized that, of course, in the middle of a war, NATO is not going to bring in Ukraine because NATO doesn't want to engage in World War III. But what Zelensky wants is something way better than Bucharest 2008. By the way, I was there and I had dinner with the president of Georgia that night when he was so waiting to hear what NATO was going to decide, and NATO decided the worst possible outcome, which was, okay, that Ukraine and Georgia would eventually join NATO, but not right now, which was a signal to Putin to act, which he did. In 4 months, it invaded Georgia to prevent Georgia from becoming a member of NATO. And because NATO and the transatlantic community never imposed serious costs on Russia for that action, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, still with no serious costs. And then it felt it was free to invade Ukraine again last year. So I think NATO's learned its lesson. And I think we're going to see a path for Ukraine to join NATO will be articulated. There won't be a date certain, I think, but there will be much more significant security guarantees than in the past, meaning I think we'll see the United States and the rest of NATO promise and commit to providing or sustaining the significant military technological assistance they've been providing Ukraine up until now, which is enabling the brave Ukrainian fighters essentially to defeat Russia on the battlefield. So there'll be a lot of military assistance. And then there will be, I think, a promise by NATO that when the war is over, and Russia's invasion has ended of Ukraine, then Ukraine will join NATO.
Let me just share with you some information from President Biden, who's just put out a statement to say he welcomes this development, the statement by Turkey, Sweden, and the NATO chief on NATO ratification. We have to put the caveat around that, of course, as you've articulated. It's got to go through the Turkish parliamentary system just yet a while, so we can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but that's still quite a breakthrough. The conversation actually is going to continue, of course, on a one-on-one basis between Turkey and the United States. Because there's plenty of other things that Recep Tayyip Erdoğan would like to talk to Mr. Biden about.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, President Erdogan's an amazing negotiator. And in my experience, you know, several decades of negotiating with or against Turkey, but often with, I'll say that the Turkish diplomats and national leaders really know how to defend their national interests by using whatever leverage they have. So I think that'll continue for a little while. But it's going to end up being wrapped up soon. I think that, or I know that, no country has been a clearer advocate of NATO enlargement than Turkey. I mean, right now, the United States and Germany are hedging on Ukraine's eventual membership in NATO. And it's President Erdogan who just came out and said, no, Ukraine needs to be in NATO. And Turkey has been a clear advocate also of Georgia's membership in NATO. I think that the strategic thinking in Turkey on this issue is clearer than in Washington and in Berlin. And to be honest, I think that's what the transatlantic community needs. The only way the war in Ukraine is going to end is when Putin realizes he's run out of space to manipulate and to threaten, and that NATO is not frightened. And by not only keeping the door open, but saying Ukraine needs to be in NATO now, as Turkey is doing, I think that is the way to bring Putin around to realizing he's got to end the war.
Well, let me ask you about that, because President Putin started this war saying he wanted to push a big buffer zone between his country. He wanted to protect his country and the territory that he sees as his country and NATO. And as a consequence of that war, as a direct consequence, he's got Finland in and now Sweden in NATO. He won't see that as a bad move, but perhaps the rest of the world will.
Yeah, I mean, it's a colossal failure by President Putin that he executed this unlawful invasion of a peaceful neighbor. If you look at the map, I mean, you know, I don't have it before me, but we all know the map. You look at the Baltic Sea, and there's Russia at the far eastern end, and the Baltic Sea is a very narrow sea. It's only, you know, I mean, it's hard even to think of it as a sea. It's more of a bay. And now the entire sea is completely surrounded by NATO member states. The one exception is the very end, is Russia at the very tip of the Baltic Sea. So this has been, or Sweden's membership in NATO, Finland's membership in NATO, is a colossal strategic loss for Putin. And he has seen Russia's border with NATO double with Finland's membership compared to where it was before he invaded. I think he knows it's a colossal failure. And he's not crazy. Maybe he's been isolated from reality a bit. You know, during COVID he was. And he has delivered the advice he wants to hear by his advisors, but he also knows what's going on in the world. He knows that, as the old Soviet cliche goes, the correlation of forces, of strategic forces, are working against Russia, and he's going to have to find a way now to make the best of it, just as he had with Prigozhin, where he's, you know, said Prigozhin is going to be prosecuted and then isn't being prosecuted, and now he's trying to make it all this coup attempt against him some sort of a victory for himself. He has the ability to make any loss, like the rebellion of Prigozhin, into a victory because he controls the media. And I think that's what he's going to have to do now with NATO, especially because Turkey is moving ahead with Sweden's accession.
Matthew Bryza, we thank you for your analysis. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. Thank you for being part of our coverage this evening.